In 1979, $1 bought 70 Iranian rials. Today, $1 buys over 1.5 million. That is a 23,000-fold collapse, the most extreme currency death spiral of any non-failed state in modern history. And yet, Iran's economy is still the 22nd largest on Earth. $1.75 trillion in purchasing power. Bigger than Thailand, bigger than Belgium. The question nobody answers: how? This isn't just an Iran story, not anymore. After February 2022, something unprecedented happened. Russia started copying Iran's sanctions playbook, move for move. Not just copying it, scaling it. But we'll get to that. Here's what matters right now. Sanctions are the West's primary economic weapon, the go-to tool for every major geopolitical confrontation since the Cold War. And according to the Peterson Institute, since 1970, unilateral US sanctions achieved their foreign policy goals in only 13% of cases. Let that sink in. 87% failure rate for the primary weapon. 18% of all global oil tanker capacity now carries legally sanctioned crude. That's not a leak in the system, that's a parallel system. And sanctioned crude from Iran, Russia, and Venezuela now makes up 40% of China's oil imports. If 45 years of evidence from Iran proves sanctions don't work the way we think, everything about how we manage geopolitical conflict is wrong. But to understand why sanctions built a monster instead of killing one, you need to go back to the beginning. November 1979, 10 days that froze an empire. November 4, 1979, Iranian students storm the US Embassy in Tehran. 52 Americans taken hostage. 10 days later, President Carter signs Executive Order 12170 under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, freezing every Iranian government asset under US jurisdiction. But here's the detail most people miss. 2 days before that executive order, Iran had already started pulling its money out of Chase Manhattan Bank, headed by David Rockefeller, the man who had personally lobbied for the Shah to enter the US for medical treatment. The asset freeze wasn't just retaliation for the hostages, it was a preemptive financial strike. Treasury Secretary William Miller estimated roughly $6 billion in liquid assets that same day. After an 8-month Treasury census, the comprehensive total exceeded $12 billion. Bank deposits domestic and overseas, 1.6 million ounces of gold at the Federal Reserve, Treasury notes, oil-related funds, private accounts, all frozen. The Algiers Accords partially resolved the hostage crisis in January 1981, but the National Emergency Declaration never lifted, renewed every single year for 46 consecutive years, the oldest active state of emergency in US history, and every renewal kept the original asset freeze alive, a financial wound that never closed. What followed was a slow strangulation. Layer after layer, decade after decade, sanctions compounded like geological strata, each one adding weight that ordinary Iranians carried on their backs. Reagan imposed an arms embargo during the Iran-Iraq War in 1984. Clinton banned US trade with Iran's petroleum sector in 1995. Inflation spiked above 50%. Then, in 1996, the Iran and Libya Sanctions Act introduced something genuinely new and dangerous: extraterritorial sanctions. For the first time, Washington was threatening any foreign company investing more than $20 million in Iranian energy with punishment. America wasn't just sanctioning Iran, it was telling the entire world who they could do business with. Between 2006 and 2010, the UN Security Council passed 6 progressively harsher resolutions targeting Iran's nuclear program. Arms embargoes, financial restrictions, travel bans, each one tighter than the last. Then in 2010, a US law threatened foreign banks dealing with sanctioned Iranian institutions with total exclusion from the US financial system. The message to every bank on earth was simple: choose Iran or choose America. There was no third option. Now imagine you're a merchant in the Tehran Grand Bazaar. You've watched the rial lose value for years, but you've survived. You've adapted. You've found workarounds. Then January 2012 happens, and this time there is no adapting. The EU imposes a full oil embargo. Iran is disconnected from SWIFT, the messaging system behind virtually every international bank transfer on Earth. The Central Bank of Iran itself gets sanctioned directly. The SWIFT cutoff was the economic equivalent of cutting off oxygen. The rial lost 50% in days, crashing from roughly 10,500 to the dollar to 17,000, then cratering to 36,500 on the black market by early 2013. Oil exports halved from 2.5 million barrels per day to below 1.1 million. Oil revenue collapsed from $114.7 billion in 2011 to just $26.9 billion by 2015. Do the math: 80% of oil income gone. For that bazaar merchant, for the university student watching study abroad dreams evaporate, for the factory worker whose salary bought half what it did last month, the message was clear. The world had decided to squeeze Iran until something broke. By 2015, the sanctions were supposed to have worked. Iran came to the table. They signed the deal everyone said would fix everything. It didn't. When sanctions were partially lifted under the JCPOA in 2016, Iran's GDP grew 12.5% in a single year. Faster than China, faster than India. Oil exports nearly tripled. The rial stabilized. Then Trump withdrew on May 8, 2018. Within 18 months, GDP contracted 12.8% cumulatively, one of the sharpest peacetime economic collapses in modern history. But here's the twist nobody talks about. The IRGC, Iran's Revolutionary Guard, got richer both times. During relief, their stock portfolio gained roughly $465 million in just 2 days when nuclear talks progressed. During reimposition, they captured the entire smuggling monopoly. Sanctions on, IRGC wins. Sanctions off, IRGC wins. The House always wins. To understand why the regime wins either way, you have to understand who actually runs Iran's economy. It's not the president. It's not the central bank. It's a construction company you've never heard of. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps isn't just a military force. It's the largest conglomerate in the Middle East, and sanctions made it that way. Imagine if the Pentagon owned Amazon, ran FedEx, and controlled the black market, then paid no taxes. That's what we're talking about. At the center sits Khatam al-Anbiya Construction Headquarters, established in 1989 by decree of Supreme Leader Khamenei. On paper, it's a construction firm. In reality, it controls over 812 registered companies, holds 1,700 government contracts, and employs 135,000 workers. It has been sanctioned by the US, the EU, and the United Nations. It operates across oil and gas, dams, highways, tunnels, metro systems, airports, railways, pipelines, mining, and pharmaceuticals. Its Persian Gulf Star refinery reportedly generates $60 million per day at peak capacity. Here's the mechanism that makes it all work. When Shell, Total, and Repsol withdrew from Iran due to sanctions, Khatam al-Anbiya received their contracts. No bidding process, no competition, just billions in redirected work. The South Pars gas field alone, the largest in the world, saw $12 billion in contracts handed to IRGC entities. Every single time a Western company leaves Iran, the IRGC fills the vacuum. Sanctions don't weaken them. Sanctions are their business model. According to NPR and multiple analysts, the IRGC controls an estimated 1/3 to 40% of Iran's entire economy through subsidiaries and trusts. And that's just the IRGC alone. When you add the broader military Bonyad complex, the IRGC plus the Bonyads plus the Supreme Leader's personal fund, estimates from the Klingendale Institute reach over 50% of GDP. Now, even bigger than the IRGC, Setad, controlled directly by Supreme Leader Khamenei. Reuters conducted a 6-month investigation in 2013. It won the Malcolm Forbes Award for Financial Journalism and estimated Setad's total assets at $95 billion, $52 billion in real estate, $43 billion in corporate holdings, $95 billion, controlled by one man, answerable to no one. No parliamentary oversight, no audits, no transparency. Setad runs 37 companies across finance, oil, telecom, and pharmaceuticals. Key assets include Parsian Bank, Sina Bank, and Amin Investment Bank. In 2009, a consortium linked to the IRGC and Supreme Leader acquired 51% of Iran's national telecommunication company for roughly $8 billion. And the former head of Setad, Mohammad Mokber, became Iran's first vice president while actively under US sanctions. Let that sink in. The man who ran the Supreme Leader's $95 billion slush fund got promoted to vice president. Then there are the Bonyads, religious foundations that function as unregulated, untaxed economic empires, accounting for roughly 20% of Iran's GDP. Bonyad Mostazafan alone is the second largest enterprise in the country after the National Oil Company. Over 200,000 employees. It controlled 28% of textiles, 45% of non-alcoholic beverages, 25% of sugar production. Astan Quds Razavi, the Imam Reza Shrine Foundation in Mashhad, owns nearly half the city's urban land. Assets somewhere between $15 and $20 billion. A religious charity that owns half a city. Iranian state media itself reported it. The top 4 entities, Setad, Khatam al-Anbiya, Astan Quds Razavi, and Bonyad Mostazafan, control 60% of Iran's national wealth. And during Ahmadinejad's so-called privatization program, 87% of state assets went directly to IRGC-linked entities. Under Rouhani, it was 80%. Different president, same result. The names on the door change. The money flows the same way. So the IRGC doesn't just survive sanctions, it monetizes them. Former central bank governor Mohammad Hossein Adeli put a number on it. Sanctions evasion operations cost Iran $50 billion in a single year, and most of that money enriched IRGC commanders. 3 revenue streams. First, no-bid government contracts replacing departed foreign firms. Second, running the entire sanctions evasion apparatus, oil smuggling, currency manipulation, front companies. Third, managing the black economy, including narcotics trafficking from Afghanistan. President Pezeshkian himself admitted it in March 2025. 20 million litres of diesel are smuggled out of Iran every single day. Bought at subsidized domestic prices, sold at international rates. The smugglers? IRGC connected. Every litre. If you followed this far, you now understand more about who actually runs Iran's economy than most Western journalists covering the region. But knowing the players is only half the story. The question is, how do they connect this parallel empire to the outside world? Through the largest ghost fleet on any ocean. Picture this. You're looking at satellite imagery of the waters east of Malaysia, about 40 miles from the peninsula. What Bloomberg calls the world's largest gathering point for dark fleet tankers. Dozens of massive ships, transponders off, names repainted, flags forged, sitting motionless in the open ocean. In 9 months of 2024, 350 million barrels changed hands at this single location, worth over $20 billion. Ship-to-ship transfers, no paperwork, mostly bound for Shandong, China. Right now, over 560 oil tankers tracked by the United Against Nuclear Iran coalition are running dark, up from just 70 in November 2020. Iran doesn't just survive sanctions, it runs a floating black market the size of a mid-tier economy. Hey, quick question for the comments. If you were a Western policymaker looking at all of this, would you tighten sanctions even further, or would you try a completely different approach? Drop your answer below. But the Ghost Fleet is just the delivery mechanism. The real architecture of evasion is far more sophisticated, and it runs through Dubai, Hong Kong, and a cryptocurrency exchange you've never heard of. What I'm about to lay out is the complete architecture of how Iran moves billions past every surveillance system on Earth. Think of it as a money laundering conveyor belt with 5 stations, each one washing the oil a little cleaner. First station, the oil laundering pipeline. Crude gets loaded at Bandar Abbas or Karg Island. Tankers disable their AIS transponders, going dark. Each shipment passes through 3 to 5 ship-to-ship transfers before reaching its destination. Along the way, the oil gets relabeled. Omani crude, Malaysian blend, Iraqi crude, bitumen blend, false bills of lading, forged origin certificates. By the time it arrives, the oil has no traceable connection to Iran. According to Windward AI, about 40% of Iranian-linked tankers fly fraudulent flags. Guinea, Netherlands Antilles, Guyana, Aruba, and 87% of Iran's oil exports go to a single buyer, China. Specifically, about 150 independent teapot refineries in Shandong province that import roughly a fifth of China's total oil. Iran sells at an $8 to $11 per barrel discount below Brent, the price of illegality. The money flows back through barter, $8.4 billion moved through exchange networks to finance Chinese infrastructure projects in Iran in 2024 alone. The Shamkhani family controls the tanker fleet and front company network that makes it all work. Second station, the shadow banking network. The US Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network identified $9 billion in potential Iranian shadow banking activity in 2024. $5 billion through China-based shell companies, routed via Hong Kong entities to UAE front companies. One Dubai-based company called Lebra Moon General Trading supplied $800 million in cash to a single Iranian exchange house over 18 months. In June 2025, the US Treasury designated the Zaring Halam Brothers Network, over 30 entities across Iran, Hong Kong, and the UAE, laundering billions. Third station, cryptocurrency. Iranian wallets received $7.8 billion in crypto in 2025, up from $3.17 billion just 2 years earlier. Roughly 22% of the population, about 10 million users, holds crypto. And here's why it's so attractive. Mining cost per Bitcoin in Iran is approximately $1,320, thanks to electricity subsidized at fractions of a cent per kilowatt hour. The global average is $26,000 to $35,000. Iran basically prints digital money at a 95% discount. The most brazen example, ZSEX, a UK-registered exchange that TRM Labs identified as IRGC controlled. It processed approximately $1 billion in IRGC-linked funds. IRGC flows accounted for 87% of its volume. And Iran's Defense Ministry Export Center, Mindex, openly accepts crypto for weapons exports, including ballistic missiles. And it doesn't stop there. The Dubai nexus accounts for $27 billion in bilateral Iran-UAE trade in 2024, with roughly 122,000 Iranian businessmen operating in the UAE. Since Assad's fall closed the Syria corridor in December 2024, Dubai became the primary route for IRGC Quds Force funding to Hezbollah. $1 billion smuggled via UAE exchange shops since January 2025, according to the Wall Street Journal. And the gold for gas playbook, pioneered by Reza Zarrab, laundered $13 billion from Turkey to Iran. Zarrab bribed Turkish Economy Minister Zafer Çağlayan roughly €50 million, and a Halkbank manager had $4.5 million in cash in shoeboxes at his home. 5 layers: oil, banking, crypto, Dubai, gold. That's the conveyor belt. It moves more money annually than the GDP of most countries on Earth, and you just walked through all of it. Now here's the part that should make you angry. While the IRGC builds this empire, the people it claims to protect are drowning. And nothing shows it more brutally than the brain drain. 82 of 86 recent Iranian Olympiad medalists emigrated. Let that number land. The best and brightest minds in the country, gone. Iran invests roughly $68,000 to train a single nurse, then watches them leave. 96% of patents by Iranian-born inventors are filed from abroad. 6,500 doctors left in a single year. 900 university professors walked out in 2020 alone because their salaries were worthless. An engineer in Iran earns $600 a month, and only 1% of emigrated Iranian elites consider returning. The global average is 7%. The annual economic loss, $50 billion by IMF and World Bank estimates, up to $150 billion according to Iran's own former science minister, Reza Farajidana. Then there's the exchange rate corruption machine. Think of it as buying a first-class ticket at economy price, then reselling the seat. For years, Iran ran multiple exchange rate tiers simultaneously. Iran Wire reported 8 different rates at one point. The key scam: regime-connected individuals bought dollars at the subsidized rate of 285,000 rials and sold them at the free market rate of 630,000 or more. Instant fortunes. President Pezeshkian himself called it a vehicle for corruption when he finally killed that subsidized rate in January 2026. The state had been providing $15 to $18 billion per year through that single window. Billions, flowing directly into connected pockets, while ordinary Iranians couldn't afford bread. The broader numbers are devastating. Roughly 33 to 39% poverty rate, over 30 million people below the threshold. Inflation running at 43 to 49%. Food prices up 72% year over year as of January 2026. Iran needs oil at $163 per barrel just to balance its budget, more than double current prices. 80% of citizens now rely on government handouts. Only 3.8 in 10 working-age adults are employed. For women, it's 1.2 in 10. Over 1 million university graduates, unemployed. The harsh reality is this: sanctions were designed to pressure the government by hurting the economy. Instead, they created a smuggling economy that the IRGC monopolizes. The regime gets richer from the sanctions premium. Ordinary Iranians get poorer and leave. The people sanctions were meant to help are the ones being crushed, and the people sanctions were meant to punish are the ones profiting. That is the trap. Remember the question from the beginning. How does a country with a 23,000-fold currency collapse still rank as the 22nd largest economy on Earth? Now you know. The economy didn't survive. It split in two. One for the regime, one for everyone else. And if you think this is just Iran's problem, remember what we said at the start about Russia. Iran and Russia didn't just run parallel systems. Those systems are fusing into one. Iran and Russia didn't just build parallel evasion systems. Those systems are converging, physically, financially, and operationally. After February 2022, Russia started building its own version of everything Iran had pioneered, and the scale was staggering. Russia-China trade hit $244.8 billion in 2024. The yuan's share on the Moscow Stock Exchange went from 3% to 99.8% in 2 years. Russia assembled a shadow tanker fleet of over 1,100 vessels by late 2023, tripling in 18 months. RUSI analyst Tom Keating published a landmark report, Developing Bad Habits, and his conclusion was blunt. Russia gravitates towards sanctioned states to learn best practice. Look at the comparison. Every mechanism Iran spent decades building, Russia replicated in months. Shadow tanker fleets. Iran pioneered with 560 vessels, Russia scaled to 1,100. China dependence. Iran sends 87% of exports at an $11 discount. Russia's bilateral trade exploded to $244.8 billion. Currency workarounds. Iran routes yuan through Bank of Kunlun. Russia shifted the Moscow exchange to 99.8% yuan. Swift alternatives. Iran built SEPAM. Russia built SPFS, connecting 550 institutions in 24 countries. Crypto. Iran received $7.8 billion. Russia legalized it and launched a stablecoin estimated to move $72 to $93 billion. The pattern is identical, the scale is bigger. But here's what goes beyond copying. The infrastructure is physically merging. Windward AI found 33 vessels sanctioned for Russian oil that also appear among Iranian-linked tankers. Caron designated it a shared sanctions evasion services ecosystem. In January 2023, 52 Iranian banks and 106 Russian banks connected via Russia's SPFS system. And BRICS Pay, prototype unveiled in Moscow, October 2024, is designed to merge SPFS, Chinese CIPS, Indian UPI, and Brazilian PIX into a single parallel financial network. The two countries are even undercutting each other for China's market. Russia's Ural crude at a $12 per barrel discount versus Iran's 11. Iranian exports to China dropped 12% in early 2026 as Russian deliveries hit a record 2.09 million barrels per day. Strategic allies in public, price war competitors in private. And then the nuclear dimension. Iran now has 182 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60%. Enough for 5 to 6 weapons. Breakout time, less than 2 weeks. Nicholas Mulder, the Cornell historian who wrote The Economic Weapon, put it bluntly. Sanctions were modeled on devastating World War I blockades that killed 400,000 in Central Europe. They did not stop disintegration, but accelerated it. Iran is the modern proof. The ultimate irony. Sanctioned crude from Iran, Russia, and Venezuela now makes up 40% of China's oil imports. Sanctions didn't isolate these economies, they pushed them into each other's arms. So what happens next? There are 3 scenarios, none of them are good. Scenario 1. Maximum Pressure 2.0, the most likely near-term path. Trump reinstated maximum pressure in February 2025, targeting Chinese teapot refineries for the first time. 3 sanctioned between March and May. Secondary sanctions threatened on any amount of Iranian oil. The results? Mixed at best. Iranian oil exports actually peaked at 2.13 million barrels per day after the policy began, in September 2025, then declined to 1.39 million by January 2026. Shandong refinery utilization dropped to 51%. but 70 million barrels accumulated floating offshore China, waiting. The UN snapback sanctions were reimposed in September 2025 after the UK and France triggered the mechanism. World Bank projections tell the rest of the story. GDP contracts 1.7% this fiscal year, another 2.8% next year. Inflation approaching 58%. More pressure, more suffering. For ordinary Iranians, not the IRGC. Scenario 2. The parallel system solidifies. If SPFS, CIPS, and BRICS pay mature, sanctioned states gain a permanent alternative financial backbone. The yuan's global payment share is still under 4% versus the dollar's roughly 50%, but it's growing. And China's calculation is simple. Discounted Iranian and Russian oil saves billions. There is zero incentive to enforce Western sanctions. The risk? A bifurcated global economy, $1 denominated, $1 denominated, where sanctions lose meaning for half the world. Scenario 3. The regime outlasts the sanctions, and history says this is the default. The JCPOA formally expired October 18, 2025. No treaty infrastructure remains. Geneva talks resumed in February 2026, described as the most intense yet, but the gap is enormous. The US wants a full enrichment halt. Iran demands enrichment rights plus total sanctions relief. Iran's economy has been under siege for 45 years. The rial has lost 99.995% of its value. The regime has not fallen. The IRGC is richer than ever, and internal time bombs keep ticking. An aging population with over 30% projected above 60 by 2050. A severe water crisis, demographic decline. End of 2025 protests were the largest since 1979, triggered by currency collapse and runaway inflation. The central bank governor resigned in December as the rial hit 1.42 million. The US acknowledged engineering a dollar shortage to create pressure. A Stanford and Johns Hopkins study concluded what the data already screams. Sanctions strengthened the Iranian state and military and ended up hurting the exact people they're supposed to help. 80% of citizens depend on government handouts, and dependence is control. The $1.5 trillion trap isn't a trap for Iran's regime. It never was. It's a trap for everyone who believes sanctions are a substitute for strategy. Iran didn't just survive 45 years of economic warfare. It wrote the blueprint for how to fight it. And now that blueprint has gone global. 45 years, trillions of dollars, and the only people it trapped were the ones it was supposed to free. And if you haven't seen our deep dive into Thailand's tourism economy trap, check it out, links on screen. Now I want to hear from you. Drop your prediction in the comments. Do sanctions get tighter, or does the parallel system win? And if this is your first time here, subscribe. We do this every week.